My name is Julia, a person known for her 99% seriousness. Yet here I am, standing outside my home, accompanied only by a solitary suitcase, hastily packed with my bare essentials. Clutched tightly in my hand are two ominous envelopes. It was on the cusp of early summer, the most enchanting season of the year, when I found myself abruptly ousted from my in-laws' residence. There was no forewarning, no hint of the impending storm. Enticed by the delightful aroma drifting from the kitchen, I completed my usual morning routine and descended the stairs, eager for breakfast. The tantalizing scent promised a feast, typical of my housemate's culinary prowess. Today, it seemed, breakfast was served American style. Brimming with anticipation, I pushed open the living room door, only to be greeted not by a sumptuous meal, but by an unexpected confrontation. "Julia, you deceived us," my mother-in-law's accusing voice pierced the air as tears welled in her eyes. Her words, laden with betrayal, echoed incoherently, accusing me of treachery and shattered trust. After delivering her accusations, my mother-in-law departed, leaving behind a lingering glare heavy with resentment. Meanwhile, my father-in-law remained, his gaze burning with simmering fury. "What's going on?" It was all I could muster, my confusion mounting. I couldn't fathom why my in-laws were suddenly treating me with such hostility. Just yesterday, we were on amicable terms, much like with my own parents. As I grappled with their inexplicable behavior, my husband Ryan, who had been silently consuming his breakfast, caught my eye. "Last night," he began, explaining that he had opted to spend the night at our other residence near his workplace, leading me to believe he wouldn't be present this morning. Had he returned home late last night? Desperate for clarity, I rushed to Ryan, seeking his assistance. "What's wrong with Mom and Dad?" My words caught in my throat just as I was about to utter, "They're behaving." But my attention shifted abruptly to Ryan, whose demeanor had taken a chilling turn. His gaze pierced through me, laden with accusation and contempt, a far cry from the warmth and kindness I was accustomed to. "Ryan, how could you?" The words spilled from his lips, dripping with venom. Gone was the gentle melody of his usual speech, replaced by a harshness I had never encountered before. This was the same Ryan who would surprise me with my favorite flowers whenever his work kept us apart. "I'm sorry. I truly wish we could still travel together," he continued, his words a stark departure from the sentiments he had expressed just a week prior. With a gesture to the secretary, who stood nearby, he signaled for action. "Take care of it," he instructed, the command delivered with an air of finality. "You've finally done it, Julia, haven't you?" His accusation hung heavy in the air, stabbing at my core. "Married me for the money, didn't you?" "What? You've taken my mother's money," I protested, disbelief lacing my words. "Wait, that's not true." The accusation hung heavy in the air, the enormity of the alleged sum sinking in. "And now you're trying to justify it." My father-in-law's voice was laced with scorn. "What? What on earth are you talking about, Dad? I swear, I didn't touch a penny of her money. Get out of this house." "Dad, what's happening?" I pleaded desperately for clarity, but received only a curt denial in response. It seemed I was being accused of embezzling a significant amount from my mother-in-law, a notion utterly unfounded in reality. I begged for understanding, for someone to believe me, but my pleas fell on deaf ears. A chill ran down my spine as the secretary reappeared, clutching a suitcase, likely containing my belongings. "Please, Ryan, listen to me," I implored, but he shook his head with a disappointed expression, as though delivering lines in a tragic play. He was convinced of my guilt. "These are the divorce papers," he stated matter-of-factly, thrusting them towards me. "Once you've signed them, send them back to me." "What? Why?" I exclaimed, my voice trembling with disbelief. "I can't live with someone solely interested in a family inheritance. It's the family's decision." Ryan's words cut through the air like icicles, sending shivers down my spine. "Now, leave." "It's not fair. I haven't done anything," I protested vehemently, but my pleas fell on deaf ears. Ryan's demeanor remained stoic as he commanded his secretary, "Ensure she never returns to this property." "What? What's happening?" "Stop." I struggled against the secretary's firm grip as he forcibly escorted me out, my suitcase in tow. Tears streamed down my face, mingling with the tumult of emotions swirling within me. Coming from humble beginnings, I knew the allure of wealth, but I was never one to resort to deceit. The grandeur of the mansion felt like a cruel contrast as I was unceremoniously ejected onto the street, barely half an hour after waking. Was this a nightmare? My mind raced, struggling to comprehend the surreal turn of events. Amidst the chaos, the imposing door slammed shut mercilessly. Just before it sealed me off completely, the secretary thrust another envelope into my hand, a final act of cruelty. "This is also from Mr. Ryan. Please take it." The secretary's voice broke through the tense silence. With a finality that matched the closing of the door, the lock clicked shut, sealing my fate. With trembling hands, I peered into the envelope, my heart sinking as I beheld its contents: a severance payment of $10,000. I had married Ryan 3 years prior, finding employment as an advisory accountant at the company where my father-in-law held the reins as CEO. Despite just passing my CPA exam, I was relegated to a subordinate role, more of an assistant to my colleagues out of pity. Then, one fateful day, everything changed. The pieces of the puzzle began to align in a way that didn't make sense. Something was amiss. Driven by a desire to prove myself as a competent CPA, I had delved into a task assigned to a colleague, only to uncover a web of deceit. My colleague had been manipulating the books, siphoning off hundreds of thousands of dollars. In that moment, a mixture of exhilaration and dread coursed through me. Yet I knew I couldn't turn a blind eye to such wrongdoing. Summoning my courage, I made the difficult decision to report the fraud to my father-in-law, the CEO. As someone deeply committed to honesty and integrity, turning a blind eye was never an option for me. Though the thought of reporting the fraud to the IRS crossed my mind, I hesitated. After all, such a drastic action would strip my colleague of their CPA status, a consequence I found difficult to reconcile with, especially after my own hard-won journey to becoming a CPA. My father-in-law, a shrewd businessman who had amassed a considerable fortune in a single generation, had been unwittingly targeted. "Thank you, Julia. We're indebted to you. Without your intervention, who knows how long they would have continued siphoning off funds." My father-in-law expressed his gratitude, his wife echoing his sentiments. I found myself celebrated as a hero, as if I had single-handedly saved the day. "Julia, if you're not involved with anyone at the moment, would you consider marrying our son?" The proposition caught me off guard, and I couldn't help but wonder if such flattery was commonplace among the wealthy. Though I laughed it off at the time, little did I know that my father-in-law's suggestion held genuine weight. Before I knew it, I found myself being introduced to their son, a man who praised me for safeguarding the family's assets. Bathed in their praise, I couldn't help but feel a sense of validation. After years of being criticized for my seriousness, it seemed that living authentically and earnestly had finally paid off. And in that moment, I couldn't help but feel a profound sense of happiness. As a trainee CPA, I had never imagined ascending to the role of official advisory accountant, let alone being appointed as personal secretary to Ryan, the CEO's son. Ryan embodied the archetype of privilege, perpetually optimistic with a laissez-faire attitude that initially grated on my meticulous nature. Yet, amidst his dependency on me, I discovered a sense of fulfillment in aiding him. "Ryan, you really need to leave for the business meeting soon," I reminded him, checking my watch. "I'll manage just fine. You should get going." "Are you sure you won't stress out the driver this time?" he teased, flashing a charming smile. "I've got everything under control," I assured him, ushering him towards the door. Perhaps he appreciated my attention to detail more than I had realized. Our relationship evolved from professional to romantic, much to the delight of my father-in-law, who had harbored hopes of our union. The wedding was met with resounding approval, and for 3 years, the dynamics between Ryan, myself, and my in-laws remained largely unchanged. The most significant shift came with my father-in-law's decision to pass the company's reins to Ryan. As preparations for his ascent to the boardroom accelerated, my mother-in-law and I found ourselves immersed in a whirlwind of meetings and social engagements. Tonight was meant to be no exception, with a business partner's anniversary party on the agenda. Instead, I found myself alone in a sterile hotel room, a stark departure from the anticipated festivities. In the heat of anger and frustration, the thought of retreating to my parents' home briefly crossed my mind. But the notion didn't sit right with me. If Ryan wanted a divorce, so be it. But as someone who prides herself on honesty and sincerity, leaving under a cloud of suspicion was unthinkable. Seated on the bed, I revisited the contents of the envelope. divorce papers, and a severance payment. Despite the wave of emotions threatening to overwhelm me, I fought to maintain composure. I needed clarity. With a steadying breath, I closed my eyes and reaffirmed to myself, I haven't taken a penny of my mother-in-law's money. That's a fact. If not me, then who? The rush of excitement and fear surged once more. Gathering the bundle of $10,000, I resolved to make good use of it. After a quick touch-up of my makeup, I made my way to the private detective's office. A week later, my phone rang. We have the results of the investigation. I arrived at the office greeted by a stack of papers on the reception table. The report, thicker than anticipated, sent a shiver down my spine as I flipped through its contents, my hands trembling with anticipation. What? Ha! Each revelation in the report left me reeling, my head spinning as I absorbed the shocking truth. Exiting the building, I was greeted by an unpleasantly brisk breeze, a stark contrast to the turmoil swirling within me. Collapsing beneath the shade of a nearby straight tree, I grappled with the weight of the newfound knowledge. Passers-by cast curious glances my way, oblivious to the internal battle raging within me. With resolve coursing through my veins, I made my way to my in-laws' home, determined to confront them. Why was she allowed inside? My father-in-law demanded, his voice laced with disdain as he berated the maid. Taking a deep breath, I stepped forward, presenting the signed divorce papers. I've brought these, I stated firmly. You instructed me to mail them. If you seek a divorce, I won't stand in your way. But I refuse to be labeled a thief, I continued, my voice unwavering. Snatching the papers from my grasp, my father-in-law turned to leave. But I refused to let him go without a final declaration. I demand an apology from all of you, I asserted, my words echoing through the room. If you're unwilling to acknowledge your wrongdoing, I'm prepared to pursue this matter in court. As the prospect of legal action loomed, my father-in-law halted in his tracks. I was pleased when you accepted me, despite my humble background. I held genuine affection for you and your mother-in-law, he confessed, his voice tinged with remorse. Summoning my courage, I drew in a deep breath, my fists clenched at my sides. Then, with a measured exhale, I spoke. I'm telling you, I'm innocent. Do you understand? Let me be clear. I didn't do anything, I reiterated, striving to maintain composure. What? What do you mean? I didn't. My mother-in-law's voice, seemingly emerging from the shadows, pierced the tense atmosphere with confusion etched across her features. I mean exactly what I said, I affirmed, extracting the investigation report from my bag and passing it to her. Please take a look. What? What's this? What's going on? Their eyes widened as they devoured the contents of the report, their expressions teetering on the brink of disbelief. The person responsible for stealing my mother-in-law's money, it was Ryan, I revealed, the weight of the truth heavy in my words. Before our marriage, Ryan had developed a reckless habit of overspending. He used to justify it by saying, "We have enough family wealth to live extravagantly for a lifetime." He indulged in frequent trips abroad, particularly enjoying gambling, often wagering hundreds of thousands of dollars at a time. Even his own parents had grown increasingly concerned, implementing measures to curb his access to their funds. They admonished Ryan, urging him to earn his own income. However, old habits die hard, and Ryan, consumed by his penchant for extravagance, sought out alternative means to sustain his lifestyle. That's when he concocted the embezzlement scheme that I ultimately uncovered. Ryan had manipulated my former colleague, who served as my father-in-law's accounting consultant, into falsifying the books. Mistakenly attributing the embezzlement solely to my former colleague, I reported it to my father-in-law without probing deeper, never uncovering the true mastermind. In reality, all the embezzled funds were lining Ryan's pockets. When the truth about my former colleague's embezzlement came to light, Ryan and his parents expressed gratitude towards me, but beneath their facade of appreciation, I sensed a simmering resentment. Was there a romantic involvement between the accountant and Ryan? It seems more like an affair, doesn't it? After all, she was married at the time, someone speculated. Nevertheless, Ryan professed his love for her, convincing her to embezzle funds for their future together. Another voice chimed in. As a consequence of her actions, my former colleague was terminated from her position and faced divorce from her husband, who had reached his breaking point. Despite obediently complying with Ryan's selfish request to keep his involvement under wraps, he ultimately wedded me. His persuasion tactic was clear: distract his parents by marrying a financially prudent partner like myself, thereby easing their suspicions and enabling him to continue his scheming. And indeed, his plan unfolded seamlessly. With my reputation for uncovering discrepancies, my in-laws relaxed their vigilance regarding Ryan's extravagant spending, simply because I was his wife. "Mother-in-law, why did you believe I stole your money?" I questioned, my voice tinged with disbelief. "Ryan told me he entrusted you with my card, Julia," she confessed, avoiding my gaze. I felt a pang of betrayal as her words sank in. "Ryan, he's been taking his responsibilities seriously lately, and I thought there might be occasions where it wouldn't be convenient to pay in cash, so I allowed him to carry my credit card. But then he said, I mustn't use it recklessly, so I'll have Julia manage it. And so, her voice trailed off, her expression clouded with regret. So, because of that, I was accused of theft. I interjected bitterly. Just to clarify, Ryan never mentioned any of this to me. Caught off guard by the realization of her son's deception, my mother-in-law's features fell slack with disbelief. "By the way, mother-in-law, have you read about what your stolen money was used for?" I pressed, seeking to redirect the conversation. I don't understand anything anymore," she admitted, her voice laden with confusion and distress. My mother-in-law's voice trembled, barely audible over the weight of her emotions as tears welled up in her eyes. I returned the report to them, bracing myself for their reaction. "The purchase of a condominium," my mother-in-law murmured, her voice laden with disbelief. "Let me see that," my father-in-law interjected, his brows furrowed in confusion. "But Ryan already has another house near his office. Why would he buy a condo for the senior accountant?" It's becoming clear now. Ryan has been entangled with her all along. Lately, he's been spending an unusual amount of time at the other house, likely staying with her. Ryan has always been with that woman. He loved her more than he ever loved me, Julia, my mother-in-law confessed, her words heavy with heartbreak. I remained composed, devoid of emotion, having already processed the nauseating contents of the report countless times before this moment. It appears Ryan has been indulging in quite the affair with the senior accountant. They even frequent underground casinos, I added matter-of-factly. "Underground casinos? Please take a look at the last page," my mother-in-law urged, a glimmer of hope flickering in her eyes. My father-in-law frantically flipped through the pages of the report, his brows furrowed in concern. "What's this staggering amount?" he exclaimed, his voice tinged with disbelief. "He's deeply involved with the underground casino. It seems he'll be grappling with debt for the foreseeable future," I explained solemnly. "Underground casino." My father-in-law's voice trailed off as he sank to the floor, overcome with shock. "Just to be certain, none of our other cards have been compromised, correct?" I inquired, prompting my father-in-law into action. "Ha!" His eyes widened in realization as he rushed to the nearest telephone, panic evident in his movements. "Stop everything. Cancel that card immediately." His urgent command reverberated throughout the house. Later, I received a formal apology from my in-laws. They expressed regret for concealing their son's extravagant spending and his affair. While I appreciated their honesty, I couldn't help but feel a pang of disappointment. Their apology seemed incomplete without addressing the hurt they caused me. Nevertheless, I handed them the completed divorce papers. With a small nod, I began to gather my belongings, ready to leave. But as they pleaded for me to stay, their sudden change in demeanor caught me off guard. Just a week ago, they had treated me like a criminal. "I'm sorry, but isn't it a bit late for that?" I interrupted, my voice tinged with frustration. "I loved you both and considered you family, but you disregarded my feelings and opinions. Do you have any idea how hurtful that was for me?" Despite my efforts to remain composed, a solitary tear betrayed my emotions, quickly followed by a cascade of tears streaming down my cheeks. "Julia." The divorce papers lay before us, a stark reminder of the irreparable rift between us. "This divorce is what your son desires. Shouldn't we respect his wishes?" It was evident that he had moved on with someone else. After composing myself and injecting a final touch of sarcasm, an abrupt alarm pierced the silence, jolting us all. Startled by the sudden noise, I furrowed my brow in confusion, only to have my father-in-law grasp my wrist urgently. "Hey, what's going on? What are you doing?" I questioned, taken aback by his sudden urgency. "You should come too, honey," he insisted, leading me outside to the garden. There, the gate that had shut me out just a week ago stood before us, and we heard a voice from the other side. "Hey, the gate won't open. Is anyone home?" Ryan's frustrated voice echoed through the gate, followed by the sound of him banging on it vigorously. What's happening? My car won't start either. This is ridiculous. Ryan's frustration was palpable as the annoying alarm persisted, refusing to cease its blaring. Listen closely, Ryan, my father-in-law began, his tone firm and unwavering. Huh? Dad, can you hear me? My key isn't working. Can you unlock it from your side? Ryan's voice crackled through the intercom, tinged with confusion. I told you to listen, Ryan, my father-in-law's voice boomed over the intercom. What? What's going on? Ryan's tone faltered, sensing the shift in his father's demeanor. You have no right to open this gate, my father-in-law declared firmly. What? Why would you say that? Ryan's voice rose in disbelief. Isn't it obvious? I didn't think you could be so oblivious. We're aware of everything. All of it, my father-in-law continued, his voice unwavering. Is Mom there too? Ryan's voice trembled with uncertainty. Ryan, Julia meant the world to us, but you're a different story. We want nothing to do with you ever again, my father-in-law declared resolutely. What? What's happening? Mom, are you there? Please say something, Ryan pleaded desperately. We know that you framed Julia. We know about the embezzlement. We know about your affair and your debts. We know everything, my father-in-law stated, his voice filled with conviction. Wait a minute, where did you get such absurd ideas? Stop spreading lies. Ryan's voice cracked with indignation. Ryan's frantic protests continued, but to no avail. Anxiety gnawed at me as I wondered if his parents would be swayed by his words and doubt me once again. However, my fears were unfounded. I trust Julia. So do I, Dad, his mother interjected firmly. Mom, Ryan's voice wavered, betraying his disbelief. We sincerely apologize. Julia, would you please consider taking my position? His father implored. What? Hey, is Julia there too? Ryan's voice erupted in anger, reverberating through the air. He seemed to be causing quite a commotion. However, his resistance was short-lived as security personnel arrived to calm him down. In the end, I agreed to my father-in-law's proposal, but with one condition: I will always be honest. Can you trust me unconditionally? They both nodded solemnly. A year later. Do you really think I'm cut out for this executive role? I hesitated, lingering in front of the executive office door. My father-in-law gave me a reassuring pat on the shoulder. Despite my divorce from Ryan, I still addressed the CEO as Dad, as we had mutually agreed upon. Julia, what our company truly needs is someone with your integrity and sincerity. It's a perfect fit for you, don't you think? He offered, his smile warm and encouraging. However, I couldn't resist a slightly mischievous question. Do you ever regret letting Ryan go? He should be the one stepping into this role, shouldn't he? Since the incident, my in-laws had distanced themselves from Ryan. Initially, he would often come pleading for financial assistance, but once he realized they wouldn't comply, he stopped. The son who had vanished under the weight of enormous debt. I wondered if he was still with that senior. Ryan let out a small, lonely sigh, but Ryan isn't the one meant for this position. The responsibility was too much for him. We're the ones to blame for indulging him too much, my father-in-law admitted. Dad, I murmured sympathetically. Hey, don't look so disheartened. Stand tall and proud, he encouraged. Yes, I replied with newfound determination, reaching for the handle of the executive office door. As it swung open effortlessly, I stepped inside, ready to embrace my new role.